You joined us for Rain of Blood, and together we made it rain bigger and better than we could have ever imagined. So now, join us for a second blazing inferno of knowledge and exploration. You're listening to Rain of Fire, the scorching sequel event to Rain of Blood, where we're going to delve into the world of fireplay education and safety as we prepare for the upcoming Rain of Fire event. Join your host, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and Ember Solaris as we ignite your curiosity and stoke the flames of passion with discussions, interviews, and authentic insights from around the globe. Together, we're three flames united in one mission to make quality kink education more accessible and open pathways to conversation and connection about edgeplay topics around the world. But before we dive into these sizzling topics, a content warning. Rain of Fire discusses mature themes, explicit content, and practices related to BDSM and fireplay. So listener discretion is advised, and this is an adult-only podcast. Other topics may include mental health, trauma, consent, and more. So please be sure you're in a good spot to engage in these topics before continuing to listen. So, grab your fire gear, stoke the flames of curiosity, and let's embark on this crackling journey together. Welcome to Rain of Fire.
Before we begin, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us today, whether you're a seasoned fire performer, a curious newbie, or simply interested in learning more about this dynamic aspect of BDSM. Welcome to our festival. For those of you that may be unfamiliar, Rain of Fire is a unique platform that provides an inclusive space for education and exploration within the realm of fireplay. Our festival, live classes, Q&A panels, vendors, and on-demand class material, all designed to deepen your understanding and elevate your skills in the specialized arena of kink. Just a quick note about today's session. The webinar is being recorded to ensure that those who couldn't join us live still benefit from the valuable insights shared by our panelists. Rest assured, your privacy is of utmost importance to us, and you can change your display name to something unidentifiable. Your microphones and cameras are off by default. And you may use the Q&A function in the chat, as well as the reaction function to engage with the panelists. Throughout this panel, we have the opportunity to learn from our esteemed panelists. They will share their expertise, personal experiences, and practical tips on a variety of topics related to fireplay, from safety, protocols, and risk management to exploring different tools and techniques. Our panelists are here to provide you valuable insights and answer your burning questions. If you feel so inclined, we are accepting donations to compensate our panelists today. You can find the donation link in the chat. Before we ignite this discussion, I want to encourage all participants to actively engage in the conversation. Whether you have burning questions for our panelists or simply want to share your own fiery experiences, your input is appreciated. Please also note that the panelists speaking today are sharing information based on their own personal experiences and their own risk profiles. It is important to remember that everyone's situation is unique, and what works for one person might not work for another. Additionally, panelists who choose not to answer specific questions should not be assumed to disagree or agree with the opinions expressed by their fellow panelists. We thank you for your understanding and look forward to a lively discussion. Welcome, guys, and welcome to this amazing team of panelists. Really excited to see you guys live and to be connected with you tonight. I think just to start off with, let's go around the group and everybody can just give us a short intro about who you are and how you found fire. And Miss Moon, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Well, my name is Miss Moon, and I started with fire back in my 20s. I saw fire performers on stage and fell in love with fire in general, and started bottoming for fire as a starting point, just to learn what it felt like and what the experience is. And then was mentored by a fire play expert to kind of get into fire on the top side.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you in the same area virtually. um, D Moon, and you say that much better in Dutch than I will ever be able to say it, but maybe you can give us your short intro.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Damon, and I come to you from Haarlem, Holland. I found fire when I was 16, and I started out, of course, not in kink back then, but in the more vanilla world. I've been a scout for most of my time, and at one point we did like we had a class on how to breathe fire and how to juggle with fire, and after that I was kind of hooked. I went into the kink scene in my early 20s, so this year is going to be my 20th year as a kinkster. I'm really getting old, like horrible. But by now, I found fire in the combination of kink. I think about 8 or 9 years ago, I was really always interested in the combination. I love fire. I love playing with fire. I've been doing all kinds of fiery stuff for years, but I never felt confident because I couldn't find a person to teach me. That's why I waited quite long for getting into it. And I've been doing fire in a kink-related context for 9 years now.
Yeah, you can't say you're old because otherwise I have to be old as well. So we are very young at heart,
Yes,
and
of course.
I've really enjoyed your on-demand classes and working with you. So thank you for joining us tonight. Dominus-J, I'm gonna give the floor to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dominus-J, or just the letter J. It's really easy. I've been in a lifestyle since I was 19 years old. I've been engaged in the fire arts for 15 plus years. When I started, I was just enamored with the idea that I could take something that I've always had a passion for and an outlet with, and bring it into the kink community. So I took the first 6 months to experience fire as a demo bottom for a couple of different mentors to find out what style I was looking for. And I found a really great mentor who was able to guide me throughout my fire journey. And I call him my pappy fire dad. And he has been able to help me just grow and flourish within the fire arts and the fire community. I also venture over into the flow arts community as well with dragon staffs and poi fire fans. So I always say, if you can light it on fire and entertain people with it in any capacity, I'm usually going to be there.
Love that, and really also enjoyed your on-demand class. So if anybody who has not seen that, I highly recommend that. You and a very beautiful lady lead us through consent and negotiation, and I found it very valuable. Thank you so much for your share. Echo, welcome, and I'm going to give you the floor.
Hi. So I guess I got into fire when I was super young. It was very fascinating. I think that's probably true for most of us. But when I first entered the kink scene, I didn't even think of fire as something that was even done in the kink world. But like kind of once I discovered it, I kind of gave up rope and put all of my time and energy into that. And I've been doing it for some over 15 plus years ago. I don't exactly know when. I know I got into the scene when I was 18, and I started doing fire pretty quickly after. So yeah.
Amazing. And you have some amazing fire tools that are available. We have a link on our Discord for anybody who's interested, but some really incredible fire staffs and wands. And we've all been watching very intently at Miss Moon using them in her demo, and you using them in yours, and really excited to see them, and excited to see them available. So if anybody's looking, please pop onto the Discord and have a look at those. Nova, I see you in the corner there. I'm going to give you the floor.
Hi, my name is Nova. I have been practicing kink as a dom for about 10 years now, and I'm really into temperature play. That's been a big part of my practice for a very long time. And Honestly, I did not think too much about how I was using fire in my practice until pretty recently. I was just like, yeah, it's temperature play. It's hot. I don't know. And then like pretty recently I was like, oh yeah, like wax play is fire play, branding is fire play. I guess I'm a fire player.
Well, we're really excited to have you, and I can't wait for your branding class at the festival. So thank you for joining us. I
Thank you
see
for having me.
I see a late but looking very dapper tonight. Worm one, Worm, welcome to the panel, and give us your introduction for tonight, sir.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I've been active in Kink 1000, so I don't have the advantage of starting when I was 19. But I've been active in Kink since 2000. I went to a private party in 2008 and witnessed fire play for the first time. And as was mentioned earlier, I've always been attracted and interested in fire, the mesmerizing flames, and so when I saw it at a private party, I was hooked immediately, and I introduced myself or reintroduced myself to the host of the party and said, I'd like you to teach me that, and he became my mentor. That was 16 years ago now, so I teach the basics, and I'm very much looking forward to the panel today.
Thank you for joining us, and we have been enjoying some of your videos on demand, and we're really grateful for your time and for your experience and your voice tonight. Thank you for joining us. Leslie, I haven't forgotten about you. I just wanted to save the best for last, as they say. So I promise I'll let you go first next time, but welcome, and the floor is yours.
Absolutely. So my name is Alessi. My handle is CelestialSabre. I am located in Texas, and so we have a very large kink community out here in Texas, actually more larger than we probably have any right to have. And we, uh, myself and my partners have been doing fire now for 2 years, but I first joined the kink community about 7 years ago. It's the first time I ever went to the dungeon, and the literal first thing that I ever bottomed for at the dungeon was a wax scene. And then when I got to DFW a couple years ago and started coming out to the dungeons here, I saw someone do fire flushing for the first time. And when I saw fire flushing, I was like, that is the coolest thing that I have ever seen. I very much want to learn how to do that and to experience it and all of those things. And so I started going to classes. I found someone the person that I saw that evening, who was willing to show me the ropes. And then I went to a few intensives and got the opportunity to experience fire on both sides of the slash. And now have also had the opportunity to teach fire. I'm very involved with my local dungeon here. I run a couple of the different dungeon nights and have taught classes consistently over the last 8 months to a year. And one of those classes and things that I focus on is neurodivergent and disabled experiences with kink, and one of those avenues is fire. And so I am very much looking forward to bringing that perspective to the fire realm and through this panel and through my classes.
Very excited about your neurodivergence and disabilities class that's coming up at our Rain of Fire, and I've been waiting for it for, like, I think I spoke to you 2 months ago about it, so I've been thinking about it for a while now. So very excited to have you here, and thank you very much for joining us. Okay, guys, we have a selection of questions. These all come from FetLife, so I'm going to get started. The first one, and I think the one that's come up 3 or 4 times, is, can you tell me about an experience where something went wrong and how you mitigated the situation? I'm going to let you put your hands up and I'll answer it, try and get you in order. So if you are keen to answer that question, just put your hand up for me. Okay, Worm literally put his hand up first. His literal hand went up, so I'm going to give Worm the floor.
Thank you. So this goes back about 7 or 8 years ago now. I was at a large public event in the main dungeon. I only use 91% isopropyl for visual. I don't normally use it on a bottom unless they special request it. But my own submissive, she loves the warmth, the heat of fire. So I was using 91 near her and spraying it behind her, not far enough away, but I was spraying behind her, letting the heat cascade onto her backside. Well, what I didn't know was that she was getting coated with a very light overspray of unburned. So she's got raw 91 on her back from head to tail, literally. And I went over and picked up a wand and lit a wand and touched her backside to do some drumming and swiping, and she went up like fireworks. Literally from head to tail was on fire, shoulder to shoulder, full width. Well, there's two things that happen immediately after accidentally setting someone on fire. First, you say, "Oh shit," and then you do it. This was all completely unplanned, that she was on fire from head to tail. Well, the mitigation for me was my prior life as a scout in the States. I was prepared. I had towel on my hip. I had my fire extinguisher. I had my welding blanket on the floor. And I got really lucky. I grabbed my towel and I just swiped it down her back. And as fast as she was on fire, she was out. She didn't even know there was anything amiss, anything gone wrong. Well, about 30 seconds later, my hand was shaking like a leaf on a tree. I had to call the scene. I whispered in her ear and said that I have to stop, and called red. And she asked me why, and I showed her my hand and told her what had happened, and we stopped. But very, very lucky that there wasn't anything worse involved. She had no consequences for the mishap at all. It's what in my industry we call miss. She actually enjoyed the whole thing, but I had to stop.
Thanks, Worm. If anyone wants to raise their virtual hand or their real hand, I might miss your real hand, but you're welcome to raise your real hand if anybody else wants to check in on this question. Ms. Moon is going to give us a go. Thanks, Ms. Moon. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this on the podcast, but I had a situation where I applied too much alcohol because I didn't, make sure that there was a lesser amount of alcohol on the cotton swab that I was using. And when I lit my bottom on fire and then went to extinguish, it lit back up. And then I passed my hand again and it lit back up. And it started to widen a little bit, the surface. And I was thinking, oh, like Worm said, oh shit. And I just kept my hand moving as quickly as I could. And I was able to extinguish the flame eventually. But afterwards, I was completely shaken up. I just knew that I had to move quickly and keep the fire from staying in one place for too long. And just extinguished it as quickly as I could. But I could have used a blanket. There was so many things that I could have done better. But moving my hand as quickly as possible and keeping the fire from staying in one space for too long actually helped. And the bottom had no idea, no clue that there was anything going on, and really enjoyed the whole experience, had a great time. We took a picture of the scene and you can see the situation where the fire got too large and unmanageable. But it definitely was a wake-up call because I had been playing with fire for a long time up to that point, and I just forgot something. And it's so easy to forget something in the midst of all of the moving pieces that go on during fire play that anything can go wrong at any time.
Yeah, a great reminder that this is edge play and that there are a million moving pieces and that we have to be present and aware and we have to keep checking in with ourselves as well. And I'm really glad everybody was okay. I think Miss D Moon, your hand was up next.
Yeah, well, thank some God, I still have no big mishaps with fire happening to myself. We did have quite a big fire during a wax play workshop that we did, and that involved one of the audience members. We actually set a parameter like, okay, you should not pass this line. We actually had people watching the parameter, and there was one specific person that basically refused to keep their distance. That person was wearing this long, flammable dress, all nylons, all that nice fluffy material, and we warned her like 6, 7 times, get away, get away, get away. Scene was done. That person wanted to check on my candles without our permission, actually, but not all our candles were extinguished yet. We also had some for atmosphere in the region, and her dress caught one of the candles, and she basically instantly lit up. She didn't even notice at that point. My bottom was laying on the floor, like stoned out of his head, because we've done wax play and he was like floaty everywhere. But in a moment of clarity, he got a big bucket of water and he threw an entire bucket of soapy water onto the person. And I then wrapped a wet towel around her, so her makeup was ruined. That was her biggest problem at that point. She scolded us for ruining her makeup and for making a fool of her. And then at that moment, she realized half of her dress was gone. Like nothing happened. She got no burns. Her ego was severely hurt. But again, thank whatever's up there that nothing worse happened to that. Because if she did see it and if she would have panicked or whatever, this could have been way worse. And this was basically the both of us knowing what to do, experienced bottom. We both basically handled out of instinct. We've practiced our fire drill so many times that it basically came natural. Just throw the water, wrap the towel, and nothing happened, but still it was a scary experience for everybody involved, actually.
I like what you said about the practice of the fire drill. I think that's the one thing that I realized very quickly in the beginning with fire, that I seriously needed to have some skill and it needed to become automatic. And I'm very grateful for all of you guys that have helped me develop my own drill and wrap my pony up as a burrito in a blanket. But you know, that's a skill that now comes supernaturally to me. So I'm very grateful for the practice. Echo, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I I actually have 2 stories, if that's okay.
100%.
Perfect. So the first one, this was probably maybe a decade ago. I was doing this one percentage fire on back when I did more fire play or did fire play more often than fire massage. I had this one thing that I would do that I had done multiple dozens of times with this one person, where once I hit 3rd burn stage, I would have their hand in the torch. I'd be holding it, but I'm pretending this is a 3rd arm here. And I'd come behind with my hand and I'd close their hand over. It's a very delicate process. You obviously have to make sure that you're going to provide enough coverage to where it's going to suffocate the flame enough because you're not fully covering it. So you really need to be in that 3rd burn stage and have it go out. And we had done this multiple times. This person was the type of player as I'd be doing on their arm, and they'd be raising their arms and legs in the butt, in the air. So it's something I had to get used to in playing with this person. One time, they decided to squeeze. And by that process, they forced some of the excess alcohol that was still in the core of the torch out, and their hand lit up. We quickly dropped the torch, grabbed their hand, pulled it in, went out. No big deal, all split second. But it was something I wasn't expecting. And so this is why I think it's very, very important to always be aware of that X factor, that thing that you're not expecting to happen, you don't anticipate, because those things can always happen. Doesn't matter how many times you have done the same thing. There's always something that can throw a wrench into it. So the second time, and the scene, continued from there, and she was fine, didn't even notice. But the second one involves a class I was teaching in another fire top, which is sort of an origin story for why I'm very, very strict when it comes to this stuff. So I was teaching in Rochester, New York. a very beginner class. It wasn't even a kink scene. It was a erotic arts fest. So mostly vanilla people. And I was doing a very intro class to fire massage. And at the end, I had people come up in a line and they could take a torch and they could test it. The fire top from that area was in line, which I thought was, like, this is a very beginner class. Like, what are you going to learn from coming up here and taking a torch practicing? Well, he eventually gets to my table and he grabs one torch and then he grabs another torch and he's going to go to dual wield, which is way out of the bounds. I don't even dual wield myself. But my bottom, who volunteered, who I met up there, had said, no, it's fine. She knows this person. She's played with him before. And then it was fine. So the fire top of this area, I figured I don't need to watch this person. This person knows what he's doing. So I turn my attention to the class. And as I'm speaking, all I hear is from the entire class. And this person had dropped a torch on my bottom. So I didn't know what to do. Obviously, like, he immediately took care of it and put it out. And he's like, okay, he's good. Like, this person is a fire top. He's very experienced. He's the fire top of this area. He had a slip up. Do I let him graciously finish? Do I interrupt? Like, at what point? And he immediately drops the torch again. And then immediately picks it up, puts it out. And he just does one or two swipes, gracefully finishes and puts the torch back. I check on my bottom and she's like, oh no, yeah, this has happened before. And I was like, then why didn't you tell me? Why would you let, like, is it because, like, the audience and the stress and, you don't want to like say anything in front of an audience? But I was very upset because I easily could have mitigated that, but I put trust without knowing this fire top, because this person was so well known in his area, that I figured he's fine. I can focus my attention here. Afterwards, she wound up having a burn, and she was willing to push through for the last few. Actually, I think he was like one of the last people or the last person, but she wound up having a burn that I believe was 2nd degree, and I was very upset. Kept checking in with her. And then later on found out that this person had said to her, oh, well, you were probably burnt before I got to you. And at that point, I became livid. I was so busy that weekend, too, because I was teaching in Rochester and then Baltimore 2 days apart. And I got an apology message without reaching out. But like, this is a situation that I could have avoided by having a firm ground on what can and cannot be done. So this is sort of the origin story of why I don't care what level you're at and who you are. If I don't have trust in you personally, you do not do fire unsupervised on my bottom because of this incident. Now my bottom wound up being fine, no scar, but it was an eye-opening experience when it came to trusting people who were viewed in high regard. If I don't know them, I don't trust them. And I put my trust in very few people. But those are my 2 stories.
Thank you for sharing so authentically. The other thing that I have become very much aware of is the personal responsibility involved in playing with fire, and how quickly, because things go wrong so quickly, that everybody in the room needs to have a voice and not be afraid to use it. And I think your story also identified that in some way, in saying that the bottom, needed to be able to say, this is not acceptable, I'm not doing it, and not feel under pressure. And I think that knowing that your bottom has a voice is a huge one for me in kink, in this kink in particular, because I think bottoms are often very willing to put up with stuff and to withhold information. And I think fire, having that voice and being able to communicate is a huge plus in active bottoming for fire. And it's one of the first kinks that, being new to fire, was a very big education for me on just assuming that personal responsibility as being a person active in the play, and that everybody in the room has to be actively responsible for what they're doing and their involvement. So yeah, I got a lot out of that story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one more thing. I think in this situation, this is why it's very crucial that we don't part of the bottoming for this person was beginners, very basic stuff. So like I take a huge part of the blame. Like I don't blame. You cannot expect a bottom in a situation like that, where you have an audience and you have someone from that area who is well known and experienced at bottom to speak up, because a lot of times attendees or people who are not as well known or have not been practicing or aren't one of like the tops in a thing to speak up in front of an audience of people. And it was definitely on me to know that this is not the class for that. Am I fully at fault? No, I don't think so. But I think, you know, I very much should have stepped in and be like, hey, we're only doing single torch fire. Yeah, I just think I harsh. There's a blame to go around in the story.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Dom-J, you had your hand up next.
Yes, I actually wanted to not really a story in a sense, but I feel it's important that we all recognize in each individual story, there was this moment of, like Worm had said earlier, of, oh shit. When you're engaging in fire and you're doing something that has, in a sense, a high risk factor, we want to make sure, as experienced tops, we are mitigating that risk to the best of our ability. And having that in information exchange between yourself and your bottom is highly important. But in that moment, in that oh shit moment, we talk about it in the medical field. There's that triage brain that kicks on. It's not something that usually is innate. It's something that has to be practiced. It's something that has to be conditioned. It's a muscle, just like everything else. So my wife and I were partners in teaching, and in all of our classes, in our fire classes, we talk about, it's not if something happens, it's when it happens. Within, especially fire, you are going to experience a situation where you are going to have that split-second reaction time. Practice it. And within our classes, we actually take our fuel bowl and we will take an individual within the class, and we actually will light the fuel bowl on fire. So that way they can see in a semi-controlled environment. We are used to things of this nature, so we never say the environment is absolutely controlled. Fire is an elemental force. You can never control it. But we are trying to make it a safe, controlled environment so they can actually learn to process and experience that oh shit moment and learn how to push through it. And that's usually the first step of what we try to train people is you can practice all day long on technique, but when that moment hits you, how you work in those couple first seconds are going to dictate how far you are and how safe you want to look at of how you can be. And it's one of those things where unless you're put in that moment, you won't know how you're going to react. So let's put you in that moment so you can process it. We also use a phrase all the time. We want to take fear and turn it into respect. If you fear a thing, you're going to react slowly. Your brain is going to react to the environment and not the situation. But the moment we turn fear into respect, you have processed that fear, know how you can handle that fear, and your actions will be able to significantly have a higher reaction time, and your brain will automatically be used to processing those emotions.
100%, Jane. I think in the very first convo that I had with you guys, you know, you just reminded, turning that skill of being able to put things out into muscle memory, and that's something that stuck with me very much through my little journey with fire, and has become super useful because I know what the skill is, and the skill's not foreign to me. And part of the getting to know my equipment was getting to know my safety equipment as well, and being comfortable with using it, because it's great to have all these fancy things like a snuff bucket and a water bucket and a towel and all of these great, I mean, they're great, but they're completely foreign for a needle player to now have to use them. So practicing with them is hugely important. Thank you very much. Very added value there. Thank you for your contribution. Alessi, I'm going to give the floor to you.
So I've been very lucky so far to not have something catastrophic happen or a very big moment, especially when I topped. There was one time I live by the standard of if I haven't used a tool yet, I'm going to use it outside of a scene before I attempt to use it with another person or living being at all. And one of the times that I was very grateful that I made that decision was I had gotten a Kevlar glove for the first time. And I had never even seen anyone use a Kevlar glove. We have a lot of people who are really into like fire flushing and things in this area. But I think right now I can really only name me and one other person who has a glove in our area. So I hadn't seen it before, hadn't seen anybody use it, but it looked really freaking cool. So I got one and I was playing around with it. And the first time that I lit it on fire, I had no previous concept before of how fast the alcohol was going to spread through the Kevlar, and how much of the glove was going to go up into flame. And so, we went into that, and I had been doing fire and topping for fire on a very regular basis by this point. And so we went straight into what Dom J was talking about, that, okay, now, oh shit, we got to figure it out, and we did, and it was great. But like that idea of, if I have not used a tool outside of a scene, I'm not going to be using it inside of a scene. And that goes for literally every part of kink that I do. And I think that it is especially important when you're talking about things like elemental elements like fire, where things might happen that are unpredictable even when you have used a tool 15,000 times. I always want to see how something is going to react when I have a more controlled environment and no one else is involved. And then the second time that something had gone wrong, I was actually the bottom in the scenario. And this is one of the nice things about being a switch, is that you get to learn on the bottom side of the slash as well, about things that you want to make sure that you are watching out for as a top. But in this case, it was wax play. But the top was put down the coconut oil on my back, but then did not wipe off their hands or anything before grabbing the candles and dropped lit candles on me. And so that's one of those things of, even though I wasn't the top in the situation, I now immediately, one of the first things whenever I'm teaching wax, or even when I'm teaching fire, especially like fire flushing, I'm always telling people and putting into practice make sure that your hands are clean, dry, that you're not going to have something slip out, that you're not covered in coconut oil if you're using oil or any sort of materials that you might be putting on somebody's back, or that they're a nice clean surface and ready to use, and that you're not actually going to be dropping something or putting other people at risk. And so those are my two things.
Awesome. Thanks, Alessi. I appreciate that. Yeah, I use learning to use your tools. And for me, it's interesting because fire wasn't something that I grew up with or had any experience with in my community. So the tools included the safety stuff as well. So learning to use that safety stuff was a good 4 weeks of everyday practicing to know that I could actually get it right. Talking a lot about safety now and moving on to safety and precautions. I'm going to pose the question, what safety precautions do you take when engaging in fire play, and how do you ensure that everyone involved is informed and comfortable with the risks? And I'm going to open it up. Alessi, I'll let you start. And then if anybody, obviously I think we've all got similar ideas, so if everybody can just add onto it, that would be great. I'm going to do Alessi, and then Nova, and then Echo, and then Jay, and then D-Moon.
So I've first put my hand up because anyone who knows me, who has gone to any of my classes, knows that informed consent is like one of the biggest soapboxes that I have. I can talk about informed consent all day. And I think that when we're doing things, especially that come into edge play or have very, very high risks, like fire does, informed consent gets even more important. And when you work with the communities that I work with usually and play with the communities that I play with, of those who are neurodivergent or disabled or chronically ill, it becomes even extra important. One of my biggest rules about fire when it comes to making sure that everyone is informed and everyone is comfortable is that if you approach me to do fire, usually when someone sees me do fire, I get approached to do fire with someone else. And I know, first of all, if I don't know you, this always applies. But even if I know you, I'm comfortable with you, but I know you've never done fire before, or not doing fire that same night, just point blank. I always require for bottoms to go home and to read. I have information that I've put together, but I always require them to go read. I always require them to go research. I always require them to go think about it, and then that way they can also go through the other safety precautions as well. I'm never going to turn around and just start a fire scene with someone that I know hasn't done those things because it just popped into their head that they wanted to do them. And that's a big part of informed consent for me, is that I'm not going to allow for frenzy to necessarily, as much as I can mitigate frenzy, I'm going to, especially when it comes to fire. Because it's really cool. Like I said, I saw it happen the first time and I was like, I want to do and be that. And so giving that little moment of pause, I find helps. Other safety precautions, I personally don't use an open flame when I'm fire flushing. I know a lot of people do, and that is totally fine. But for me, I use a lighter with a neck to light my torches every time, because the dungeon that I go to has very small little tables that we use to put materials on, and I do not want that open flame to be near my alcohol whatsoever. I'll also, typically I play with a 70% alcohol. I do have 91 that I will sometimes mix in, or a 91 if like people really are experienced fire bottoms who know what they like. I know how to play with it. And I will do that, but I start everyone down at a lower level. And I won't just jump into 91 with anybody. Um, and always, there's the things of having knowing what kind of fire that you are starting, knowing how to best put out a fire, using either fire blankets as a way of put on hands, or just like wet towels. Knowing if you are starting an alcohol fire, that you're not going to be throwing a gallon of water on top of that alcohol fire, and and how to react in those situations are also super important. And then I also have an oh shit kit that is very specifically my fire oh shit kit, where you have like the different bandages that work best on burns, and very specific things. So it's different than if you're doing like an impact oh shit kit, or even a needle oh shit kit. Having something that's very tailored towards fire and the impact that fire can have.
Thank you so much. Nova, I'm going to give the floor to you.
Hi. So I do a lot of different types of play, but it was actually a fire play scene that really made me value informed consent in a different way. Because I do think I was operating on a lot of assumption for a while of like, oh, if I, inform the bottom like what is going to happen in the scene, they will understand the implications of those actions. And I had a scene where there was no fire contact on the skin, but there was fire present, and the bottom was placed very close to it for an extended period of time. And when the scene ended, I was like, oh, your skin is very red, you may have experienced very, very light burns. And they got very upset and they were like, I didn't know that was a risk. And I was like, oh, that like I need to, going forward, be much more upfront of like listing every possible risk and being like, do you understand that these are risks? Do you understand that this could happen and are you still okay with it? Um and thankfully they didn't actually get burnt and there was no like consent violation in that, but it did make me value having a more in-depth discussion about risk before a scene. And now I'm very much like, here's every possible thing that could happen. Are you okay with that risk? And I also encourage my bottoms to do more independent research as well, instead of just assuming like, if you are enthusiastic about this play, obviously you know what the risks are. Like, just doing that check-in and making sure that they actually do instead of just assuming.
Thanks, Nova. You're going to have an admin kink like the rest of us Sharps players soon.
Yeah.
Echo, the floor is yours.
Hey, so first, all the information that I'm relaying is directly correlated to horizontal fire play using 70% ISO and within the United States as far as the rules and regulations go, unless stated otherwise. So I think the most important thing when it comes to safety has more to do like with your setup, and understanding what you're doing. I think that safety when it comes to the bottom and negotiations and all that is also important. But if you don't have the safety for your setup, the safety for risk mitigation, it really doesn't matter about, a house fire can burn and kill your sub. A burn on your sub that's going to typically occur in horizontal fire play statistically won't burn down your house. So we really need to put emphasis on setup. And part of that goes with fire blankets. The way that I set up mine is I fold it in a zigzag pattern above the head. The reason why we keep it above the head on the table is because we want to protect the airway and head. So any burns on the body, airway, very, very important. We need you to breathe for life. You do not want to burn an airway. First degree burns are going to be typically classified, depending on the organization, there is some overlap in clinical definitions, but generally speaking is lasting redness and pain and sometimes swelling. You do not want any of that on your neck or your face. If you, I am not a fire spinner, but fire eaters take a lot of risk because if they inhale those superheated gases, they can get burns in the lungs, which are very, very, very deadly. Now in horizontal fire play, we're really not doing too much. We can do fire on the face. I've done it before. There's special precautions, but we're not going to get into that too much. But generally, fire blanket, hold it in a zigzag pattern at the top of the table above the head, allows for very quick access. We're also primarily doing fire on the back more often than other parts of the body, or ideally split evenly. But since it's closer to that airway, closer to that head, that's the main thing to protect. And what this allows for is that you can quickly take that fire blanket and it will easily unfold. And it should be sized for the body or for the table. You want to be able to completely engulf your bottom because the rules and regulations for NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency within the United States, is to not use a fire blanket on any fire that you cannot completely cover. So we have to assume worst case scenario that if our bottom is on fire everywhere because there was an incident, I forget where in the US, where they were doing cupping where they had the alcohol in the fire cup and they were pouring it over, setting that cup down, and then lighting the cup of, that they previously poured out the alcohol. But what happened was they wound up having the cup that was full of alcohol without transferring it, turned it over and lit, and it went everywhere. So that's the situation where you're going to get fire over a large portion of the body. So we need to be able to fully cover. So second is, where's your fire extinguisher? We need to make sure that it's set up in a location that we can access based on the statistical probability of where fuel bowl is going to cause a fire. And in relation to exits, you don't want your fire extinguisher on your equipment table, because what if your fuel bowl spills on your equipment table? You do not want to have to reach through flame to get it, nor do you want to expose a compressed canister to fire. Now, I think fire extinguishers are kind of built in ways to resist that, and I don't know the exact amount of heat that would cause an extinguisher to explode, but anything under compression you don't want to put near flame. So we have to think critically about where we put those so that in the event something happens, we can quickly deal with it. And so a lot of that comes into appropriate setup. How do we mitigate risk of a fire occurring or for fuel bowl spills? And we kind of have to look at all these things. Then the next thing is being skilled in your techniques. You can have all the negotiations in the world. If you're not good at what you're doing or you don't have experience in the techniques, consent isn't going to stop a burn. So I think having a good understanding of the techniques that you're doing. I don't dual wield yet because I don't trust myself 1000% to never drop a torch. My left hand is terrible. I will show people as an example of what when I first started doing fire, how it would look, because like it takes time to kind of get into the flow. So I think it's very, very important to understand what you're doing, understand the mechanisms behind how it works, and basically have very, very good, consistent skill with that. And then we get to, negotiations, consent, a knowing bottom and how much heat they could typically handle, because burns are going to react. Different people will have different levels of the phrase I want is heat tolerability, I suppose. So we want to make sure that whatever techniques we're doing, whatever heat output that we're working with, we need to be able to control. Well, I don't want to use the word control, but we want to be able to manipulate that heat output. So we can provide an amount of heat that is comfortable and feels good, but isn't dangerous for that bottom, and not so low that the bottom isn't actually experiencing the heat or getting anything positive out of it. So we kind of have to do that fine line, especially when it comes to fire massage. That's sort of the goal, to have that nice consistent heat. But yeah, I would work in that sort of order. Worry about your burning your house down, how you can safely put out fires if they occur. Work on your appropriate setup, make sure that you are skilled in the techniques that you're doing. And then we get to, consent and knowing your bottom and having those discussions.
Thanks, Echo. Some great ads there. And I know that you've got a lot of information on the 101 that's on our on-demand. So if anybody's looking for more info there, please have a look at our 101 on-demand from Echo. Dom-J, I'm going to give you the floor.
All right, thank you. To really address the question, I always break it down into three things. There are three tools whenever I play with fire that are invaluable to me of what I need for safety. One has already been talked about, the oh shit kit. So I have, and you can get them on Amazon, you can get them online. It is a self-contained burn kit. It has everything you need to be able to administer to almost any type of burn that you would have. It has safety gauze, it has burn cream, it has different types of Band-Aids that are usable and available. And it comes in a self-contained sealed package bag. I will buy those. I also will have no problem or issue breaking that seal on that and making sure that that person is handed that bag. It is my responsibility to take care of the people that are on my table. And for me, my own personal opinion, the $17 to $20 that I have invested in that, it pales in comparison to their safety. So as my responsibility, I will hand the tools necessary to be able to take care of that. And I will personally, within that moment, be able to take care of whatever hurt that we have engaged in, because we don't want hurt to transfer to harm. Harm is permanent. Hurt is temporary. Sometimes we want it to hurt. That's kind of the lifestyle we're in. But harm is permanent, and we never want to transfer anything to harm unless it is established. The second thing we talk about is fire blankets, but that actually is a very broad term, and not a lot of people understand that like Echo said, the one size does not fit all, and there are different materials that you can get fire blankets from. I see quite often with individuals that come into dungeons, and the fire blanket that they have is actually a safety fire blanket, which normally has, it's chemically treated on average, which means it's going to be incredibly harmful to human skin and human interaction. It can have metals and fiberglass woven within them, which also can melt on the skin of an individual, which can leave really, really bad, harmful burns. What I personally use is a fabric called duvetine. It's actually a really, really tight woven material, and you want to use something that has a very tight weave to it, because the whole purpose is to extinguish. So we want to get rid of all the air in between the fire and the fuel source to snuff that flame out. And something that has a very, very loose, like wool knit, is not going to help. I see people with towels. I see people with different types of materials, and I like to sometimes just sit down with them afterwards and just let them know that there are, in a sense, better fabrics that we can use. Another fabric is called bull denim. It's a very heavy, tight weave that you can use. You can get it at most fabric stores. Those are the type of things I utilize within my fire blankets to make sure that I am extinguishing flames properly and the most effectively. And the best kit, the best tool that I also teach and I believe in that you will ever have in your tool belt is yourself. I will always put myself in harm's way over my bottom. I talk about this in my negotiations. It's actually a very big sticking point in my negotiations is if I am using a technique, I am always going to put a barrier between the flame and the bottom, and that barrier is going to be me. I take on that personal responsibility. I take on that personal risk. Because at the end of the day, if something were to happen, I'd rather it happen to me as opposed to my bottom. And that just goes along with the kind of style of technique that I teach and I believe in. Not everyone has to follow, one way. I don't believe that everyone has to find their own way of flowing. But it is just a philosophy I've always had in myself, is that barrier should be something I absolutely can control. And the only thing that I can absolutely control is myself. So that is my best tool. I am utilizing my hands, I'm utilizing my arms, I'm utilizing parts of my body to put myself in between the fire and the bottom for safety.
Love that, Jay. Thank you so much for those valuable ads. D Moon, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you. Well, lots of awesome things have already been said, and I very much agree with all of them, basically. I think for me that's really important before I go into a scene, even before I set up, is that I check all my materials beforehand. Like, is everything still in good quality? Is there no damage? How are my fire blankets? Do I have the right extinguishers for the right situation? For instance, it's good that you have a fire extinguisher, but if you use like a CO2 extinguisher on a person, you're gonna have a bigger problem than when you have them on fire, actually. So know your materials, know how to work with your materials. And I was lucky enough that I used to work in heavy industry, and I actually was trained as a fire sentry by the fire department. And so I also had some stuff that I could actually, ask the fireman there, like, okay, I have this idea. Could this and this and this work as an alternative? Or I have found this fire extinguisher that costs like 10 euros at a semi-dollar store. Is this good enough? And especially during the COVID period, they had a little bit less work because we're a company-owned fire department. I could actually answer lots of questions on how I could offer alternatives that are also accessible for people that don't have the funds to buy expensive fire extinguishers, for instance. So I say, make sure that you know how to operate. And also, I never do fire play without a spotter. Even when I do one-on-one in my own environment, like in my own place where I'm home, literally my home, I always have a spotter. And third thing for me is important is know your own abilities and also your own capacity, know what you can and cannot do. Don't do stuff for the sake of cool. We all have stuff that we can or cannot do. I'm a fire spinner. I know how to do like the nice things with the poi. But still, when I do, for instance, fire flogging, I only use one-handed techniques because, as Dom-J already said, I put myself in between the bottom and the fire. So if something goes wrong, if there's too much fuel on the back or the fire is getting too big, I still have one hand free myself to wipe it out. So I can do that without having to interrupt the scene, for instance. And I know how to do the poi spinning with 2 floggers, but I refuse to do it because I want to choose the safety of my bottom over the looking cool part. And for me, I don't feel comfortable using that technique on a person because I want to be able to be that barrier. And sometimes people tend to do stuff just for the sake of cool. And sometimes forget that they might not be able to physically do it or that their bottom might not be able to physically do it. Because you also have the risk of the fire, but there's also the risk of the fuel. So if you don't know the capacity of your bottom or maybe the physical disabilities of your bottom, you might put them into risk by inhaling certain fumes. If you're playing inside, fuel also uses up oxygen. So if you have a bottom that has respiratory problems, for instance, they might suffer from the fumes and from the temperature and the lower oxygen concentration maybe in the room. So the negotiation, not only the fire risk, but also the risks of your materials, of your fuels beside the fire.
Amazing. And I love that you mentioned capacity. I think Echo mentioned as well, like knowing your skill, knowing what you're capable of, and being aware of what you can manage and being realistic about that. So I definitely love the repetition of that. I think it's very valuable. Miss Moon, I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, everybody has made amazing points, so I'm not going to repeat anything that anyone else has said. It's phenomenal. I will say that in terms of informed consent, what Nova said was really important to me because I like for people to actually see pictures of 2nd and 3rd degree burns so they can see what that could look like and actually understand the severity of a burn and what it could end up being. I mean, we've seen probably burn pictures before, but I like them to revisit that so that they understand that that's a risk that they are taking, and that it's very real. I want it to be real in their mind as they're going into fire play and understand that it's something that could happen. And does happen to people. So the other thing that's important for me as a preparation is that I like to have Google Maps, all of the hospitals that are nearest by on a little list. So create your Google Maps list and map out all of the nearest hospitals that are within ideally 10 minutes or less away. If it's an emergency room, a private emergency room, or a public hospital, whatever the case, just know that you can quickly put it on a map and get somebody to the hospital as quickly as possible. And make sure they're also comfortable with you calling 911 if there needs to be an ambulance because you can't transport them because the burn is too severe for some reason. So those are things that I want them to think of and be conscious of. I want to know where their insurance information is if they have insurance. I know a lot of countries don't have private insurance issues or things like that, but in the United States, it's definitely a concern for me to make sure that their insurance information is available, or if they don't have insurance, do they understand the repercussions of what they're about to do? Because if something happens, it could be extremely costly. It's like Jay has his oh shit bag in case of emergency. And, you'd rather have something like that than a really costly event. But there could be something that happens, like even a trip to go take care of a second-degree burn can cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars, if not more, depending on where somebody goes if they go to the emergency room. So, and Alessi's making a good point about hospitals with a burn center, knowing where those are, extremely important. So just being conscious and familiar with your hospitals in your area can be extremely helpful.
Yeah, amazing. And Alessi also made a good point in the notes here saying specifically hospitals with a burn center. Not every hospital has a burn center. I think my Echo mentioned the story about the cupping that went wrong where the fuel was poured onto the person. And I know that story stuck with me hugely when I started in kink, and also made me very aware of the financial risks and pressure on your risk budget from a ability to adult and ability to go to work on a Monday morning, and how much that can affect your lifestyle and what is involved with that. So I think a third-degree burn can have a 6-month impact on your life, and I think that we don't want it to happen. We want to use absolutely everything in our power for it not to happen, but the reality is that it is definitely a risk. So that's something that, can you afford that in your risk budget? Can your bottom afford that? Can you as a top afford it? And how do you budget for that, and what do you allow? And I think that story, I knew nothing about fire at the time, and it's something that really stuck in my head, and I think I used it in about 100 classes after I read it, but just made me very aware that 5 minutes of fun on the table can go so severely wrong that for 3 months you're not able to work or look after your family or provide for your family, and that has to be budgeted into the play. And that's where this becomes, where edge play becomes edge play. And the reality of edge play is that it can have long-term effects and can cost you an absolute fortune. Our country, if you don't have medical aid, you're really in trouble. So yeah, great points to be raised. I've seen Nova's got her hand up again. I'm going to give you the floor, Nova.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on the communicating potential hospitalization with your bottom is it's not just about like proximity, like it was mentioned, like not all hospitals have a burn unit. And also, at least in the US, like not all insurance covers all hospitals. Like I know quite a few people who they need to go to like one specific hospital because that's the only one that's covered by their insurance. So that's also another thing to discuss with your bottom. Don't just be like, there's a hospital close, like have that conversation. That's all.
Yeah, and in my country, that can end up costing hundreds of thousands of rands if you end up at a hospital where you're not covered, and that's definitely a great point. Okay, guys, moving on a little bit to talking about your skin. People want to know, do you use anything to prep the skin for fire massage? Things like oils. What oils do you advise? And then also just part 2 for the question, are there any type of fire retardants that you use on the skin for playing, before playing, for sadistic play? Dom J had his hand up first. I saw that. That was super fast hand action there. The floor is yours.
So the things you can actually prep the skin with, no matter what, we're engaging in the ability to change the thermic structure of your skin. So you want to make sure that your bottom and whoever you're playing with is properly hydrated beforehand. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people jump from table to table to play, and then they get the fire and they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, let's get you something to drink first. Let's get you hydrated. Let's get you calm, because we have to make sure that we have to have a discussion, because what you did previous will absolutely affect what happens on my table, and vice versa. Jumping from fire to rope to electro, it absolutely is going to affect the intensity of those scenes. We are pulling moisture out of your skin. We are superheating moisture almost. You want to make sure that that bottom is hydrated. When it comes to lotions, I tend to shy away from needing moisturizers pre. I like to moisturize post to put that moisture back into it. I have a standing rule that I have to say I kind of enforce it on people. Unfortunately, please don't cancel me. You are not allowed to get off my table unless you drink at least half of a 20 ounce of water after we've played. Now, I do tell you that beforehand, but I need to make sure it's my responsibility to put some liquid back in you. I cannot trust a person who's in an altered headspace who just jumps off my table, who might want to go and have another scene, to properly take care of themselves. It's my responsibility, as long as you're on that table, to make sure you are doing what you need to properly take care of yourself. And I am doing my responsibility to make sure you are taken care of as well. As far as before, there are a lot of things people have difference of opinions on. People have opinion on lotion. People have opinion on perfume. No matter what, lotions and perfumes have different alcohol contents within them. Instead of the question of have you put on lotions or perfumes, I have changed my pre-negotiation to when was the last time you applied that? Because if a person has put on perfume 4 hours ago before I actually seen with them, the fumes of the perfume have evaporated and actually been absorbed within your skin to the point where I'm applying fire to your skin. I'm going to be cognizant of it, but it's not like it's going to light your skin up because it's been 4 hours previous. Now, if you said I just sprayed on perfume because I just came out of the bathroom, then we're going to have a little bit of a different conversation. One of the other things that we as fire players, tops and bottoms, need to be very much aware of is the age-old enemy of the fire player, glitter. Glitter is our mortal enemy, and we must combat them every chance we get. It is so commonplace and so widespread, and it's such a thing that people don't even consider that this is an inherent danger. Glitter is made out of just a multitude of harmful things that are low melting point. So now you have either hot metal, fiberglass, plastics, just confetti, anything that glitter can be made out of, we're putting on the body, but now we are heating it and we are putting it into the skin. Not good at all. So if someone actually has glitter on their body, I'm going to ask them where did they apply it, and I'm going to politely ask them to wash the affected area of where I'm going to play, or if it's something along the lines of, well, I just put it on my face and my shoulders, I'm going to only play across the back and the calves and the lower buttocks area to totally stay away from that area. But I still will ask them to at least give a good washing within the exposed area. But those are our enemies, and we need to stay vigilant against them. So thank you.
So you heard it here first. Those are our enemies. Glitter is not your friend. I think any statist will tell you that we are all anti the brats with their glitter, and it definitely has a way of staying in your lives for a couple of days afterwards. So now I have even more reason to be anti-glitter in my house. So I'm with you, Jay. I support this cause. But just quickly going to what lotions you've applied. As much as, you know, everybody warned me in the beginning and everybody told me these things, I have quite bad eczema, and I use a water-based lotion, and I use it liberally twice a day. And I had put lotion on at 8 o'clock in the morning like I normally do, and then not even thought about it, and done fire at about 4 in the afternoon, and there was still enough water in that lotion that I got a first-degree burn from where the fire went over that lotion, and that lotion heated up in the creases of my arms and where I was just playing with the wand on myself. So, you know, I think there definitely is it's something to be noted that you need to be very aware of everything that goes onto your body before you play, whether it is even for me, it was nearly 12 hours before I played. So, I didn't even consider it to be something that would come into the risk profile. And because it was a medication, I didn't even think twice about it, which is, I'm really careful about my knowing myself and my self-awareness and stuff like that. And I didn't even think about it. So just being super vigilant and taking personal responsibility for everything that I'm doing at that time. But it was just interesting, and that was a water-based lotion. So great tips, and I'll fight the glitter fight with you, sir. Deep Moon, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, totally agree with the fact of not having any lotion on there. I had the same experience a few times with bottoms that had water-based lotions, or didn't tell me that, or said that they applied it in the morning, but it still affected them later on. Also, I don't want it on my torches. I don't want to have any, especially the creams, they're really fatty. I don't want that on my torches. I don't like it personally. But also messes with my own fuel. So I always check what was it and when was it applied. Also, does it have any essential oils? Some essential oils really respond heavily with temperature or with fire on its own. Already are skin irritants sometimes. And that can get worse, especially if you have perfumes that have a high content of essential oils. If you heat that up, you can have really bad burns even after the perfume was applied, literally 12 or even 24 hours later. Also, I get often the question if I have any fire retardant I put on people before, and I don't. I know you can get those kits on Amazon, like where you can put yourself on fire like a special effects person, cover yourself in one of those cotton suits and light yourself on fire, and then the skin gets treated first with a fire retardant gel. I know it exists, and I've done it myself. I've been put on fire like that for a show once, but I don't like to use that kind of material because one, it's very expensive. Two, it's not needed for the kind of play we do. If we have our safety precautions in check, we have our own ways of preventing that kind of bad damage. So also it gives a false sense of security because being able to use that kind of material costs a lot of training. It's not like you can just apply it and that's it. So I'm not a fan of those so-called fire retardant gels to use before play. I would never advise to use them. Also, it can give the wrong viewpoint to people that are watching a scene, because people tend to get less careful if they think they are safe. People think, oh, nothing's going to happen to me, and oh, look what they are doing. They can make such big flames without any safety precautions in check. So that's why I really don't like that kind of material to use in fire play. The prep I do always ask my bottoms is if they're clean. Like, did you clean your skin off? Have a quick shower before, and I'm definitely with Dom-J on this. Hydrate afterwards. I always make sure if there are no burns. Dutch rules and regulations regarding treating of burns is not to apply any lotion or burn gel on a burn unless a doctor has specifically told it. So I always check afterwards, after play, if the person has no burns, even first-degree burns. If they are burn-free, I do always treat the skin with like a water-based moisturizer or like calendula or something with no alcohol after they taken a shower. So clean the left of the alcohol off the skin. Alcohol dries out the skin badly. Heat dries out the skin badly. So moisturizing afterwards is important, but also hydrate, drink lots of water indeed beforehand, and also check that if that's the case. But no specific fire retardants here.
Thank you so much. Wim, I see your hand has gone up. Your virtual hand, not your real hand.
Yes, thank you. I too am one of the players that I recommend against lotions for several reasons. As you brought up, Kitten, regardless of what it's made of, it holds heat. And as long as you're aware of that, that's a risk assessment you can make and choose to play or not. but I choose not because what you say 10 hours later, it was still heat. And yours was water-based. Most of the ones I'm more familiar with are usually petroleum-based. That has a flash point. Now, we're talking very thin odds here. But there actually is, in my opinion, one fire retardant, water. I typically don't do this, but I've heard of people that literally wet the skin on their bottoms and then play with fire. But even that water is absorbing heat as you play on it. So that's an informed decision that everybody gets to make for themselves. I choose not to go that route. On the oils, so we're in the Midwest where I play, there's a lot of people that insist on using oil and fire cupping. Okay, let's say that's a given for the moment. So there are flash points for these various oils. A lot of people want to use mineral oil, or that's a petroleum-based product. And so it has a flash point, and flash point is not exactly when it's flammable, but it's good for comparison here. The flash point of a baby oil is 270 something degrees Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, I don't know the Celsius equivalent, but 270 something for petroleum-based mineral oil or baby oil. A lot of people instead use olive oil. Now, I think that's a reasonable substitution because the flash point of olive oil is 370 something degrees Fahrenheit. So we're talking thin odds here, very small odds, but why not reduce them if you can? So people will use olive oil because it has a higher flash point, meaning it's harder to set a flame. Well, I carry that to its logical extreme. There is coconut oil, there is grapeseed oil, and there is avocado oil. Seed and avocado oil, to me, are the very best choices here because they are in 180 something degrees Fahrenheit flash point. They are the hardest to catch fire. Now, avocado oil where I am is 3 times as expensive as grapeseed oil. So I wind up choosing grapeseed oil. Because it's a combination and effectiveness. I think seed is 4.2 and avocado is 484. Again, that's Fahrenheit. To me, that difference is negligible. I will choose the cheaper option there and go with the grapeseed. This is just my risk assessment, but I will not use petroleum-based oils when I don't have to. I can get a plant-based oil is generally a much better choice. Olive oil, grapeseed oil, and the very best is avocado. And the information is readily available on the internet on what the flash points of these oils are. There's tables that literally compare them all. You can see all the different flash points in one place and make your informed decision. I carry a bottle of grapeseed for people that request it, but personally, I don't use the oil even for fire cupping. I would rather yank those cups around into position because I'm a sadist. I would rather hear the lovely squeals that go along with the twisting and torturing of that cup. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wim. I'm with you with the squeals. Alessi, you had your hand up. I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, so I actually use coconut oil. Coconut oil has a flash point of, I believe it's like 420, and is been pretty consistently good to me. I don't use coconut oil for all types of fire play, and I don't use coconut oil for all bottoms and all types of fire play. It's one of the things that I negotiate with the bottom up front of what kind of experience the bottom wants to have is going to determine whether or not I'm going to suggest if we use coconut oil beforehand, because there are a lot of people who do fire play as a bottom who are not masochists. I am a sadist, and so I enjoy playing with masochists a lot. But also as someone who does education and also does the, like gives people's experiences, I always want to tailor that to what my bottom wants to experience because it's something that I value. And so I will use coconut oil if a bottom is maybe trying something out for the first time, isn't a masochist, or wants a little bit more of a slower going experience, if they have super dry skins or if they have concerns about skin getting dry and things like that. One of the reasons why I said earlier that I won't just turn around and do fire play with someone who approaches me that same night is because it is not in my risk profile to talk for someone who has been putting lotions or perfumes or substances on their skin that I may not know what those are. And I don't know if they necessarily remember what those things are. I think that one of the good things to remember what Miss Kitten said, we don't always think about all of the things that we put on our body on a day-to-day basis, and not everybody thinks about the same category of things. And so in my negotiation forms and conversations, I will just simply ask, what do you put on your skin? Just point blank, because sometimes people also are putting antibacterial ointments or antibiotic ointments. There's so many things that people might be putting on their skin that they're not even thinking about when you ask them the question of, did you put perfume or have you put lotions on today? And so what I'll do is I'll walk the bottom through or have them walk me through more accurately what they put on their skin. And I will tell them, before we are going to do our scene, make sure that you've showered, you've taken, you've cleaned off your body, but then don't put any of these things on it. So that way we know that we're having a nice, clean surface to work with that isn't going to add more difficulty. Although I will say, as a switch whose S-type is very much a brat, I am very pro glitter, but you are all very, very correct that glitter has no place when we're doing fire play and is a giant danger. And so I will also be very clear of, we need to take glitter and put it in its proper place, which is everywhere else, but not fire play.
It's a note to the glitter. We are completely, this is a complete glitter ban. I'm using that as as an established rule from now on so that I can avoid the glitter in my house. Echo, I saw your hand go up. The floor is yours.
Oh, I think Worm put his hand back up, so I'm not sure if he has something to say before I go.
No, that's an accident. I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Perfect. All right. So I think first there can be, I am not an expert in this area by any means. I work as an EMT full-time in my day job, but we're not taught about skin hydration. We're only taught about heat loss in the environment through burns, because that's what your organ does in that case. There's a lot of I think when it comes to skincare, because there are so many companies out there pushing certain products, it can be very difficult to get a very scientific understanding. I've been Googling while everyone was going, and there's just so much contradictory information. And I think because in layman's terms for the average public, it really doesn't matter to understand on that scientific level. So it's very important to try to rely on research papers and .edus for information, but interpreting that information correctly and applying it appropriately to fire can be a very daunting task. With that said, my general practices are I always recommend showering before, mostly because I want all that bacteria off the skin. I want the skin as clean as possible because I don't want to introduce that bacteria to our torches. Now, our torches are not sterile. Even in something like needle play, once you open a needle, it is no longer sterile. right? But we try to keep as clean a surface as possible. So I think it's very, very important to limit exposure of bacteria to our torches. Because a lot of times, like, unless you're checking every square inch, even with shaving, you're creating microscopic cuts on the skin. We don't want any bacteria from our torches that is there to get into those areas. Now there's more research I think that needs to be done on whether or not bacteria can be introduced to such a small scale cuts. But there's a lot of research with studies that shaving causes microscopic cuts, even if you don't see blood. So it's very, very difficult. But generally speaking, since our alcohol, it's a very low level disinfectant, it does not kill everything. And it more denatures a cell and stops the growth of bacteria. There's a lot that goes into researching alcohol's efficacy as a disinfectant. So I try to mitigate that bacteria. Part of that is having my bottom shower, if possible, prior to doing fire. I stay away from contact fire on genitals around the anus, and obviously, but then the question becomes, what constitutes the genitalia? Because if we're talking about STDs, trigger warning STDs, HSV1, sorry. If we're talking about, or I guess in this case, HSV2, even though HSV1 and HSV2 can present both on your mouth and on your genitals, typically speaking, it's improbable for that to occur. Just like mold prefers warm, moist environments, HSV2 prefers the nerves between your hip bones all the way through your genitalia to your taint, I guess we'll call it, non-medically speaking, all the way back to the anus. And there is so far out a distance from that nerves can be that you can produce a cold sore. You can get cold sores on your finger, which I forget the name off the top of my head. I believe it's like herpes. Getting the term, but you can get herpes in your finger. With HSV1, you can get cold sores anywhere between, it sits in the nerves between your earlobes all the way down to your nipples. So correct me if I am incorrect on the exact locations. Last I looked this up. Herpetic whitlow, thank you. So I think that when we're trying to avoid this bacteria approach, like, it can be difficult because where do we apply fire to safely? And I think as a minimum, we can say we avoid genitalia directly, but then how far away from that, right? So it's very, very important to practice mitigation of bacteria to your torches, because I don't believe we can properly disinfect them. We don't want to soak our torch in bleach because bleach and isopropyl make chloroform. Now, granted, we're obviously going to let it dry, but I don't want any residuals in that torch, especially when we're igniting something, and putting it on the skin. We don't know in those cases whether or not those residual particles can mix with the fuel or affect the what is produced during thermal degradation, because there aren't necessarily studies on it, because they have no point to, because kink is not a world where many studies get done. They don't test hair mousse and light it on fire because it's not designed for that. So there's a lot that we don't know. But in the end, I think showering is very important, if possible. I think wiping down the skin with appropriate wipes that are designed for the skin, specifically if they're used in the medical world. I forget the name of the ones that they do use, but then you also want to clean off that. You don't want any residuals or different chemicals like on the skin. I'm not a fan of oils or lotions. I don't want those oils on my torch. And yes, we're picking up some oils from the body, but unless you're showering, that's kind of inevitable. And some people produce oils so quickly that showering isn't going to mitigate that. You'll disperse those oils, but they're just going to start falling again. There is anecdotal evidence based on many people that many bottoms that I've spoken with, who I've done fire with, speaking from other tops, that information bottoms have relayed to them. But anecdotal, lowest form of evidence, that having lotions on the skin can affect how the heat builds up in the skin. I don't know this to be true 100%. I did find one study. I'm on my PC, so I can't share the link, but it was a specific heats of oil and water, and that oil heats up slower at first, and then spikes a lot quicker. But there's a lot that goes into this, and I'm still trying to understand a lot of it. It can be very complicated, and then applying these experiments over. But like generally speaking, the theory that I have is that the oils in the skin will hold on to heat at different rates, which will shorten your potential scene time. The longer you go, the more likelihood theoretically that you could have a burn. But again, anecdotal evidence, this is just my theory and interpretation. One thing that you'll sometimes see when working with different bottoms is that sometimes the excess alcohol will sit on the skin differently. You'll be able to have work easier with trails, and sometimes you can't really get trails at all. And I think my theory for that is has to do with how well hydrated the person is, and how oily their skin is. I get very dry skin. My partner has oily skin, so we have that contrast. I barely get any oil produced. At most maybe between my nose here. So I'm a very, very dry skinned person. But my theory is that since oil is hydrophobic with water, it allows for the alcohol to sit a little bit better. It can allow us to do those trails. And I think on people who are drier, they tend to absorb those excess fluids more easily. Which hinders our ability to do trails efficiently. But again, I don't have any major backing for this. It's my theory on what could be going on. So very low level theory, but it's the idea. So showering before if possible, to mitigate exposure of bacteria to our torches. I don't like using lotions or oils. I don't want those to get in my torch. When it comes to dealing with burns, as an EMT, I have to follow certain protocols in and out of whether, like when I'm working and even when I'm not working. So when it comes to treating burns, I won't even use lotions after doing fire unless it's 15 or so minutes after, because you can trap heat into the skin. So the way that we treat burns with the EMS within PA, following my protocol specifically, is you want to rinse the area of the burn for at least 15 minutes, because the water as it flows over the burn will draw away the heat from the skin. So you're lessening the extent that burn will have, or in its finality will get to. Then ideally, this is with sterile saline as well, but most people aren't going to have sterile saline in their homes. And typically, you're not going to have enough to do it for 15 minutes. So if you have running water, perfect. You want to make sure it's cool, not too hot, not too cold. Putting anything cold on a burn can progress that burn, especially from first to second degree. You pat dry the area and you apply a sterile dressing to cover it. The reason why we want to cover it, and this is after 15 minutes, after we've drawn that heat away from the skin, the reason we want to cover it is because our skin, the largest organ in our body, works to regulate the temperature of our body. If you have a very, very small burn, generally speaking, like less than 1%, it's not really a huge concern. But with larger burns, you need to cover, because otherwise you're going to have heat loss to the environment, and you could become hypothermic. And that would be my process. If it's serious enough to go to the hospital, this is slightly off topic. My recommendation is to always have ambulance transport you. You do not want to be in a situation where you made a decision to drive someone and their injury became more severe, because EMS can provide more treatment for them than a layperson. So you're taking on the risk of a potential lawsuit if they could prove in court, and I am not a lawyer, but if they could prove in court that by delaying that care of getting there sooner, you've put them more at risk. So go cautiously with that. So as an EMT, though, I'm obligated to treat people that I know who are that have an issue. So if I have a bottom and they wind up getting burnt, I'm going to follow my protocols. If they want to do something else on top of that, like apply burn cream, I cannot apply it. I can't stop them from doing so. But I'm in a weird situation because I have to follow protocols because I'm held to a higher standard than your average layperson. But I would say generally that's my thoughts, and I don't want to take up too much more time.
Echo, great, absolutely great feedback, and really appreciate you adding value to that. Some good points that you have mentioned, and some stuff that's going on my negotiation page as well. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about your favorite techniques, what you enjoy doing most with fire, and what's still on your bucket list for fire. Echo, I see your hand is up, so I'm going to give you the floor again. I think it's because you've forgotten your hand up, but I'm just going to pick on you.
Oh, my apologies. I did what word I.
Okay, Dom, Jay, do you want to answer that?
So I would have to say when it comes to things that I actually really enjoy doing, I tell people all the time, it's the connection that I love building with an individual. For me, fire is, I'm a dragon. Fire is my element. My wife is a phoenix. So we we exist in fire, we live in fire, we breathe fire, we are born of fire. It's our element. It's how I energetically connect with people. So I enjoy doing the actions, but I really enjoy building the experience with people. And I found I'm lucky, I found very early in my kink life that I'm not the things that I do, I'm the individual that does things. And I want people to do things with me, not allow me to do things on them. So it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what actions we do. It's that connection that we have with people. It's the experiences we can share with people and create together. We're on this journey together, and we're building scenes together. I see a lot of people walk in and they're like, "Oh, I want to do the thing to me," and I'm like, "Okay, hi, my name's Jay. Let's actually get to know each other a little bit." Those are the things that make me want to go out and engage within the community and within individual spaces and scenes, is to build those experiences together. And I tell people all the time, I want to know afterwards the good, the bad, the ugly, because I want to filter out as much as I can of the bad and the ugly, and be able to never have to worry about doing that again. And every scene that you have, we're going to build on, we're going to try and make it better. That is how I evolve, is I want to hear some of those things that you didn't like about it. I tell people, thumbs up if you love it, thumbs down if you hated it. I'll file it in the back of my head, but I still want to know you hate it. Because I always want to build a better scene. I always want to be better. As far as a bucket list, that's a loaded question. I actually, one of the things that was on my bucket list originally, I love co-topping. So I love co-topping my wife, other members of my firehouse. We are all usually really good with co-topping. It takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of trust to co-top with another individual. You have to make sure that, your styles are going to mesh well. Your belief systems are going to mesh well when it comes to fire. I was privileged enough to have a scene with 5 members of my firehouse simultaneously, all co-topping with 5 bottoms, and we did it in a sense of diamond formation, and we were moving around every 40 seconds, going to a new bottom within the diamond formation. And I can only speak for my words. It was an incredibly fluid and synergetic experience to be able to have that. If you have the ability to work with others, it just takes that to another level. One-on-one is awesome, and it's what we're looking for. But if you have the ability, they always say threesomes are better. But if you have the ability to integrate people into the scene with their permission, it's awesome. I will actually negotiate with a bottom if they have a partner to allow their partner to integrate a little bit into the scene as well, because they have a natural connection, and I am tapping into that allows that bottom to trust not only me, but trust their partner in the moment as well, that they know they're absolutely safe. And I will work together with that and allow that to form within the scene. So if you have the ability to try these things, I highly recommend them. But as far as a specific action on the bucket list, that actually is a very interesting question. I don't have an answer for that one.
Oh, Jay, the American Dragon. I actually have you saved on your email on my computer as the American Dragon and the Phoenix. So I just wanted to tell you that I have a South African dragon, so there has to be clarity between the two. My I didn't know I needed a dragon until I got one, and now I don't know how to live without it. So it's important that there's clarity. But thank you for that, Shay, and sharing the moment with a partner. That intimacy is beautiful. I used to be quite controlling in the dungeon, me never, but when I sort of invited partners in to share the needlework, and even if it's just pulling the strings of the piece afterwards, that the 2 partners are doing that together and they can share the moment and they can go home together and share that bit of intimacy that we've created. It's incredibly special. So I really loved that about what you were saying and related to it quite extensively. Thank you. LSE, you are next. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I have a few techniques that are pretty consistently used whenever I do fire play. My 2 favorite forms of fire play are fire flushing, and I'm one of those that does believe that wax play, especially specifically how I play with wax, counts as fire play. And so for fire flushing, one of my favorite things to do is that most of the bottoms that I play with regularly are also impact bottoms of mine. And so I will take the wands and I will trace in the alcohol letters on their back. And they will need to guess what trail of letter that I am setting a light on their back before I put it out. And if they don't, there's usually a consequence that comes with impact play that's negotiated. And that's typically a lot of fun. I also do various forms of play of like I do blasphemy play, but if someone doesn't do blasphemy play, sometimes I'll take like famous quotes, or if they do blasphemy play, maybe I'll take verses, and if they can't complete or fill in a word or something like that or identify who the quote is by, then I will sometimes I will draw an X with the wand on their ass and then put it out with my hands. And so there's lots of ways that I take other kinks too that I play with those people with and introduce them into fire play. And I really enjoy doing that. I'm also a very big fan of sensation play and knives, and so I don't know if this will be controversial, but it's in my risk profile and it's in the risk profile of the humans that I do this specific type of play with. But I will also do knife play before going into fire flushing at sometimes. And of course, I'm not necessarily I'm not gashing anyone's back out with a knife, right? But making just like those little marks, like kitten scratches, basically, and getting the skin very, very sensitive and very primed. And then feeling that feeling of the alcohol on top of it, and then the warmth of the fire. All of those things can really add to experience, and the people who I play with greatly enjoy it. And as someone who is a very large sadist as well as really big knife top, it's something that I enjoy as well. And then for wax, something too that I like to do is I will actually use the wax to sort of glue certain objects onto the skin. I can put flowers onto the skin with wax. Again, and blasphemy play, I've attached a rosary onto someone before with wax, or even different just different things. I've made like little river rocks and rivers on people's bodies before and turned them into living altars, or living objects of worship and things like that. And that is always something that I greatly enjoy. And then also mixing like ice with fire play is something I enjoy as well. With wax, I will have a candle in one hand and ice in the other, and I will drip the cold ice onto the skin and the hot wax to the point that the bottom doesn't know which one I'm doing at any point, because they just build to a similar sensation. As for bucket list, I really want a fire cane. I don't have a fire cane because I don't have the money for a fire cane. But I really love that cross section that we find between impact play and fire play, and how we can intertwine those two safely.
I didn't even know fire canes existed until about 3 months ago, and now I have seen Echo's fire cane in action with D-Moon, and I'm obsessed. So I share that with you. It looks amazing. D-Moon, off you go. Yeah, you're ruining my budget here, girl. D-Moon, do you want to take the floor?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, so I'm totally with Dom-J on that the best play is the one that gives the connection. And the plays I like to do most is the ones where the person you're playing with gets that oh yes moment. And that can be like, for some people, that's like the tiniest amount of flesh cotton on literally the top of their finger. And for some people, that's having their entire back lit on fire with flaming bubbles. But the moment at the bottom is like, oh yes, this is my thing. That also makes me feel good, because you have that interaction, you have that moment together where you together reach a point where you're both very happy with it, where you're both very much in the moment, and you really connect through the fire. And I'm a ritualist. I'm a pagan. I'm a celebrant. So I really like the ritualistic scenes. If I have to pick a favorite, totally with Alessi on that, on the blasphemy play, of course. I love doing stuff like that. At one point, we did a priest burning, like 2 witches burning a priest. We had so much fun doing that. And the living altars, turning people into like Lumiere from The Belle and the Beast. Just have a few candles on their hands and have them stand there, greet people properly, stuff like that. The predicament, I like that. Scenes with a story in it. Personal favorite technique would be fire flogging, because I just like the combination of the kink part and the fact that I am a flow artist as well. So that's a technique I prefer. And on my wish list would be, well, I already did like the big fire scene at one point where I had multiple fire tops and working together, which was awesome. So I kind of had my big bucket list item already. But I really want to learn how to do fire cupping, but then from a professional, so not kink-wise, but from a person who does this traditional medicinal way, to learn about all the pressure points, how to really apply them in a proper way. Because I also really like to do the fire massage. That's one of my favorite things to do to people that are non-kink, to really use the massage technique for relaxation. And I think that's going to be a good addition for people who have like really the muscle knots. So not the kinky cupping, but really the I don't want to say medicinal, but alternative medicine cupping.
I have to say that moment in your class where your bottom gets set up light, it's a little bit with the flash cotton, but then with the bubbles, and there's that absolute moment of pure frigging joy. It was just
Yes.
fucking fabulous. Like you could feel that. I could feel that all the way in Africa. Like it was. I
Yeah.
think that's probably my best moment of July. Like that's what I've enjoyed most.
It was
Just seeing that.
amazing. Yeah.
It was incredible. They were so happy,
Yeah.
and the joy was contagious. And just being able to share that with us as an audience, I think that was like you gave me so much information, but I think that was just that smile, and that
Yes.
little moment of glee. I will keep that in my memory. It was a very special moment to share with us. So thank you very much. I loved what you had to say. Thank you for sharing. Worm, I'm going to give you. You'll have your virtual hand up, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you. I have a couple items. My inner 14-year-old boy requires me to say that my favorite is anything involving fire and breasts. It's just straight up, you have to acknowledge some things to be true. Also, is just for me, but the sound of a lit fire flogger as it whooshes past my ear, that's just stiffy making. There's just no other way to describe it. It's just the delicious sound that I'm even pretending to be in partial control of this whoosh as it comes past my ear and lands on a bottom. But I think actually my favorite is more to, and to use Kitten's phrase, my admin kink. I recently had the pleasure of leading a fire committee for one of our local groups, Fetish Lifestyle Open Group. They decided to a set of fire play rules, and they made a poster and they put it up in the dungeon. It's a public play party dungeon once a month in St. Louis, Missouri, in the States. And I had the just pleasure of leading that committee to develop the fire rules for Flog. And that was, just so gratifying to be able to contribute, for me anyway. And then bucket list, again, it's more of an admin kink, but Flog is presently without a venue. They're looking hard. They've been going for 24 years now, the continuous event, but they're without a venue and they're looking for a new one. So I'm very much looking forward to their leadership to, one, find a new venue, and two, establish fire play in that public space.
Thanks, Worm, and thank you for sharing your 14-year-old boy side. It's nice to know that you're still young at heart. And I hope you find your venue. And I'm really glad that other old people have admin kinks like I do. So I feel less alone after that share. Echo, the floor is yours.
So I had Worm send me the question because I didn't hear it, so I'm just refreshing my memory real quick. Cool. So I mostly do fire massage. So I do it in the vanilla world. So I'm very much more professionally oriented with how I do fire. If I'm doing something like, if I'm doing fire play in the scene, I usually stick to vertical. So like fire caning or vertical contact fire. Basically the same techniques we're using horizontally, but in a vertical position. I am more of a service top than anything else. So the few scenes I do as a top always involve vertical fire. But generally speaking, I mostly do fire massage. I care more about how it feels than how it looks. And as far as other things I want to do, so I want to get into dual wielding. And when it comes to the stuff that I make, I could make paddles all day. But what would I be innovating in the paddle world? I'm not that skilled of a woodworker where I can make these fancy elaborate paddles, so I don't make them and sell them, because my belief process is I'm only going to make something if I can fix an issue or make something better. So I wanted to get into dual wielding so that I had a first barrier to put out the trail. And this was the first prototype I made years ago. So you have an elongated torch head that's pre-soaked in water and wrung out just so it's wet. Because as we know with the 70%, the reason our cotton torches don't burn is because the amount of heat output up to 70 doesn't get hot enough or burn long enough to evaporate the water from our torch. Water acts as a coolant in Class A fires. So we know that our elongated torch head is good. And then we have our standard medium torch head. And basically how this would function is that you can make contact, you're in first burn stage, you have your first line of defense to put out any excess, you lift up and roll. And then I can use the back of my hand if I miss something. And when we're doing like trails, it's very, very important to make sure you have full coverage as you're moving across, because you don't want the fire to jump back. So any little gap in your hand on the body, will cause that fire to move through. So this is a great first line of defense, and it's something that I want to get into, but I want to make sure that I've never dropped a torch on a bottom. So I want to keep that going for another 15 years. So I want to make sure that I can be absolutely safe. So I want to get into that. So I have these, but the issue is because it's off center, it's very cumbersome to use. So the next prototype I'm making will have the torch be right in line with the stem, and then the elongated one will be an offshoot from there. So that way it functions much more similar to our standard torches. And then when you get into, or actually even better yet, you want to do trail, or if I do want to go across, I could just lift up if I wanted to light back and then cover again. Or I can use it without if I'm in second or burn stage, or I just want to have a trail and not put it out right away. But this applies to most other things. I want to get into fire flogging. I don't like the fact that there is a chain separating the falls and the handle. I want to remove that. So I have a design in process. I just need to make the prototype. But there's a lot of things, most of the things I want to get into, I want to solve the issues with what's currently out there, like a fire glove and not having the alcohol get on your hand and not having your hand heat up. So having a moisture barrier and a heat barrier built in, which is a lot of stitching and a lot that goes into that. And then fire flogging, fire paddle. So I've been developing a fire paddle for like 6 years now. I probably put like a few grand into it. And I have a prototype, but your first prototype sometimes is going to have issues and I need to fix those things. But I kind of want to get into these other aspects of fire, but not until I have a tool that I'm satisfied with and, that fixes the issues that's currently out there, so that I can use it in the way that I want to use it.
I love that you have a complete intent behind your process, and thank you for sharing that with us. If your paddle comes on the market, please let us know. I would be very interested in that. Ms. Moon, you are next. Stage is yours.
Yeah, so I have always been a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I love seeing adrenaline rushes on other people too. So I still get great thrills when I play with flash cotton on a larger scale. I love the domino effect of creating long strings and kind of doing designs and seeing the chain of the flame going all over the place as fast as it can go. And there's just so much, like I still get a rush when I do it as a top, and my bottom gets a rush. And no matter how many times the bottom's done it, they still get that adrenaline rush, and there's always a thrill behind it. So I love knowing that I'm causing that chemical reaction in people, that they're getting that rush and that I know how they feel because I'm feeling the same thing. So there's some mutual rush that you get out of that experience. And fire bubbles have the same effect, definitely. There's something really majestic about fire at that scale when you're playing with fire bubbles that just gets everybody's adrenaline going. And I love that feeling of just the awareness that the fire is still an uncontrollable element and that you're not completely in control of it. You're just creating as safe an environment as possible. But there's always a thrill in handling fire like that. So those are my favorite as far as techniques go. And then as far as my bucket list, Echo's fire cane's definitely on my list of things that I would like to have. So very interested in fire caning. I'm very excited about trying that out and investing in more exciting toys.
Yeah, that fire cane is like right on the top of my list of things to do before I die. It's I saw it in action. It looks amazing. Nova, I think you are next. The floor is yours.
I currently in my practice use a lot of indirect fire. I suppose like wax has been brought up a few times and like branding. And I have done some bondage scenes that involve fire being close, but I have not done any skin contact fire. So that is a goal for me going forward, as I'd like to bring that fire even closer to the skin. I feel like that would be really fun. And a couple other people have brought up like a spiritual connection to the element of fire. And personally, developing that connection with fire has been the most difficult of the elements for me. It's just one that doesn't come very naturally, and exploring fire through kink has actually really helped me establish that connection, which has been great, and I am looking forward to doing that more. Yeah.
I love that journey for you, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. Okay, guys, I have a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A. The first one is there anything that you guys have in your fire oh shit kit or aftercare kit that is non-negotiable that you won't play without? Miss Moon.
Water. Definitely water.
Water.
To hydrate, absolutely. To hydrate, to have on hand for everything and anything as far as hydration goes. Yeah, really important to me.
Worm, I'm not sure if your hand is still up from the last time or if you have got something else you want to add. Ah, so your real hand's up. I'll take the real hand.
Well, it goes back to the 099 class where we talked about, yeah, I have a long list of things I will not play without. The fire protection, the fire blanket, the fire extinguisher, keeping my fuel separate, controlling my space. If that dungeon is too crowded, I may choose simply not to play because I can't keep the looky-loos away from my or whatever. Head wraps, first aid kit. Yeah, I have a fairly large first aid kit. It's not specific to a burn kit, but one of those ones that you put up on your links is actually my first aid kit. I have a long list. And yeah, I'm maybe it's age related or admin related. I don't know, but I'm pretty influenced about certain things. They will be there, or we'll just have to find another day to play.
100%. Alessi?
And so any of my safety and like first aid things are always non-negotiable. Like those are always going to be with me, or we're not doing fire. And that's just a end of story, period. For like aftercare specifically, non-negotiables, like that has already been said, but something that I keep in mind, just like general aftercare kits that sometimes people have and sometimes people don't, is I keep peppermints or like butterscotch, depending on like the people that I play with. I kind of know and kind of find their preferences, and most people will tolerate so like some forms of candy like that. Just I keep them on hand because one of my partners has hypoglycemia, and I found that there's a lot of people who don't know that they might have blood sugar issues. And if we're doing a scene that has like any elements of pain, or even if people just sometimes when they get like relax, or when they get kind of in shock, which some forms of kink play can in fact put the body in that sort of shock response, they might find that they have a blood sugar crash either during the scene or after the scene. And so that's just something that I keep in my aftercare kit that some people don't think about, because I find it to be important just in case something like that happens.
Thank you so much. D Moon?
So I totally second all of the stuff that's already been mentioned. One extra piece that I always carry, specifically in my first aid kit, would be a roll of cling film to cover large areas if you have like a burn, first degree, second degree burn, but also to cover up place that may be too big for a bandage or maybe used up all your bandage. Easy way to cover up, especially if you are going to the emergency room anyways, if there's a big burn or a big wound. It also covers up if it's only a first degree small burn. It also covers it up and helps prevents it feeling cold and sore and stuff. Prevents scratching on it.
That's a great tip. I think Echo had their hand up next.
Yeah, so I assume by oh shit kit, we're not, I know we're mentioned fire blanket, extinguisher, all that. So assuming like all that stuff is not, our oh shit kit is dealing with like things that go wrong, like burn wise specifically, I assume that we're talking about. Let me lower the hand before I forget. It's difficult for me in my position because I'm an EMT. So once there's an injury, first I have to make sure the person wants me to treat them. And if they do, I have an obligation to do so, legally speaking. Once that hurdle is met, I would initially follow my protocols. But it depends on where we're playing. If we're in an event, the event's going to have DMs there with all the equipment that we need for dealing with that. So I don't need to bring my jump bag. For those not familiar, a jump bag is your basically your kit of medical supplies that you would need when leaving your truck to go to an incident. So in this case, like once that the personnel that are medically trained get to me and I verify that they're at least an EMT level, I transfer care. Because they're the ones on scene to do that. I'm acting as a lay responder. They're acting as EMTs on duty. They have their equipment. So I'm forced to transfer that care. Now, if I determine that they used to be a medic in the Army, but they're not licensed, I'm not transferring care. Because if I transfer care, I'm transferring to a lower level of care because they're no longer actively certified. So depending on these situations, but generally speaking, most events have medical staff that have the equipment needed to handle all these things. So I think it's slightly redundant when it comes to specific kink events to bring a jump bag. But if you're being extra cautious or you're not an EMT or these things, you can follow your own like practices. But for me, I'm a little bit more limited. I wouldn't obviously delay care. So I'd immediately we're going to go rinse, right? If we have a burn. But as soon as they get there, care is being transferred. And likely they're quick. They'll be there before the 15 minutes before I need to actually bandage. There's no reason why they won't be there within that first 15 minutes. When it comes to home, I have a jump bag in my home. So the question being, would I ever play without it? Yeah. It depends on the person. It depends on who I'm playing with. But there's not really a situation where I would be without it. So the question for me is slightly moot. But I'm an outlier here, whereas I don't consider very basic fire play edge play. Because if you know what you're doing, you have very good control. It's very, very difficult to cause a burn with just a basic sliding move where you're not overlapping, you're not overlayering an area multiple times. You're moving at a very quick speed that a burn is impossible to occur at the rate of speed with that torch. And obviously this is also assuming that you're skilled in what you're doing. But we can apply that to every kink. Every kink is edge play if you don't know what you're doing. So I think sometimes we overcategorize a little too much, but yeah, for basic fire play, meaning like basic sliding, very beginner palming, I don't consider it edge play. For me, edge play begins when we start to get into larger heat outputs. So we're using larger torches, like a large or an extra large. We're using 91% alcohol. We're doing vertical fire. We're doing a 45-minute long scene where we're overlapping a lot and we're getting that heat build up because the longer we do fire, the more likely a burn is to occur. So it's definitely a gray area, but there's a certain point at which I would consider it edge play. But there have been situations where like I'm fine to play without, because if someone does get burnt and they need to go to the hospital, we're calling 911. The EMTs are likely going to redo whatever care I provide, and in the 15 minutes it's going to take them to get there, I'm still going to be running water anyway, especially because I'm only like literally 2 minutes from my local fire station. And medics are usually the ones that will, well, medic EMT, so higher level of care. But that being said, I do usually keep a jump bag on me. So it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but I've absolutely done fire before without some of those kits. Now, I never do fire without my fire blanket. I never do fire if there isn't an extinguisher accessible. So there are certain things that I would say I don't, but I think per the question, we're not really including that in our OSHIP bag, because that's we should have that set up before we get to OSHIP. So I kind of consider them separate.
Thanks, Echo. Great feedback there. Dom-J?
So everybody, I would like to just mirror everyone, because this panel here has a very, very wide and diverse perception of what fire play is. And I'm glad and really, really happy to hear that we are all still on the same page when it comes to safety, when it comes to advocating for oneself and one's bottom. But I'd like to just take a moment to be slightly arrogant and say that I would like to answer for everyone here with that question, because I have heard a different version of this from every single person here on this panel. There is one thing I will not play without: informed consent. And I know everybody here has mentioned it at least one time in this session here. So I just want to highlight that. I really appreciate everybody and their perceptions and their views on how to do stuff. But when it comes to me, that is the one thing I will not. I tell people, it's the last question I ask people in my negotiations. Do you trust me? And do I have your consent to continue in this form of play? And if there is any hesitation in either one of those questions, you are not getting on my table.
Look, you're a dragon who hates glitter. I mean, of course we have to trust you. Who wouldn't trust a dragon who hates glitter? I mean, it's just an obvious answer there. Yeah, the panel's been absolutely amazing. It's really it's a topic that's difficult for somebody to start in when you come from a community that is completely excluded as far as mentorship goes, or as physical in-person lessons go. So something like this for me has just been groundbreaking in my exploration and my knowledge, and to spend time with you guys has really been a privilege. And I just want to thank you all for your time tonight, and for the hours you spent interviewing with me, and all the work that's going into the classes to help us promote this. But more than anything, you guys have forwarded my fire journey hugely, and I have great gratitude for that. And you've all left a little bit of your own legacy in my fire play, coming from a country that has no mentorship in this. So it's been incredibly special, and I really